should we get started here? Go ahead and take
Yeah.
the roll.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Trustee Kane,
Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Yes.
and I know Trustee Ames will not be joining us, nor Trustee Cates. Trustee Lauren,
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
And we also have for other trustees who are not committee members, Trustee Mishu and Trustee Martin.
Great.
I do know that Jeremy has joined, but no other non-voting members.
Okay, it's great to see everybody. We have two main objectives today for this meeting. The first is to do a walkthrough of the initial feedback on the first draft of the plan. And then we're going to have a presentation that those of us who are on the writing committee, Barbara, Kelly, and I saw a few weeks ago about the proposed implementation plan and process. And we've got Vice Chancellor Jeff St. John here, and is Carolyn here as well? Yes, there's Carolyn, and Carolyn Dorsey, and we also have Kim Jenkins as well. I think today's meeting, we didn't really do like firm time blocks here because these are two big topics. They're both really important. I'd say from a time management perspective, since this meeting is scheduled to go until 9:30, that Kim, we need to save at least 30 minutes for your part, I would say, to have a real robust conversation, if not 45. So Jeff, we'll start with you with the feedback. Some of the people on this call and the members of the board of trustees and members of the strategic planning committee did meet a couple of weeks ago to review the initial draft of the plan and give some thoughts on it before it went live to the public. Jeff sent some stats the other day, but I'm sure he has updated ones on the number of clicks and opens and feedback responses that we've gotten. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you and let you lead us through this section.
Emily, thank you. I'm glad to be able to share this update today and answer any questions that you and the trustees have. I actually have the data from Monday is the most recent data we have. We're batching the feedback by week. So Monday to Monday, we'll have updated data throughout the month. But for the benefit of the other trustees, as of Monday, March 6th, just over 1,000 members of the UMS community had clicked on the link in the Chancellor's February 28 email to review the first draft. We have no way of knowing who read all the way through or who read a couple of pages, but that rate of response, that level of inquiry within the first week is promising from our perspective. 89 people clicked the link within that same email to submit feedback, and 27 actually did. That doesn't mean that the people who have opened the feedback form won't submit feedback later. Part of the reason why we included, excuse me, a very specific date, March 21st, as a requested date by which to get initial feedback was because we knew some people would choose to do so after spring break. In particular, faculty schedules being what they are, quite a few of them are very busy this week, will be away for the spring break week and then come back, and we anticipate getting a bump in feedback at that time. The feedback form asks respondents to identify their campus affiliation and their role, faculty, staff, et cetera, but not their name. It permits, and we actually encourage anonymous feedback, so people would be very free and frank in what they wanted to say. It then invites feedback on the specific components of the plan, which is, you all know, I'll go through them very quickly: vision statement, the defining unified accreditation statement, the introduction, then the 5 core commitments, and then the implementation section of the plan. And as a reminder to this group, the executive summary will be written in April as the plan itself is nearing final form, taking final shape. And I'll just share a few observations about the feedback that we've received to date in 4 categories quickly, and then very happy to have a conversation with this group and answer any questions that the trustees have, or would love to hear what the trustees think at this stage. The first observation would be that we've gotten several several constructive suggestions or corrections. And I'll just share just a few brief examples. One person very helpfully said, biomedical sciences is a broader, more encompassing term than bioengineering. Another person suggested that we draw on our master's in social work graduate students to augment our mental health resources, our mental health staffing, a practice that has been profitable elsewhere in the nation and is becoming a best practice. It's on the ground training for graduate students in MSW programs who are working towards degrees in that field. And then a number of people shared suggestions about specific wording, and those are actually, from my perspective, very important. You could look at people getting down to the level of specific words and say, well, let's look at the bigger picture here. But actually, some people have a very strong eye for detail and are wonderful contributors at the level of this, phrase it this way, not that way, use this verb, not that verb, use this noun, not that noun. That's helpful to the writing team. It will absolutely help us sharpen and improve the plan in the second draft. The second area of observation I would share is that with very, very few exceptions, respondents did not identify major omissions. I mean, my number one concern is that we would get a consistent number or a consistent level of alarm in those responses saying, you forgot about A or B or C. We had talked previously at the writing team and with this committee about the fact that we do need to add specific actions and goals connected to philanthropy and the foundations, or that would be an appropriate area to add. But there were not other areas where people came forward consistently and said, you have forgotten wholesale this large area of our operations, which I take to be an encouraging sign. We did get a few very helpful suggestions for specific things that we might consider adding, such as a direct reference to students with disabilities, which is great. But again, no persistent beating of the drum for some large area that we should be thinking about and haven't in the first draft. Now, the trustees or the presidents may come back and say, there is another area that we've since thought about and we should add it for the second draft, but that's a bonus from my perspective. We then move it in and go from there. But that was a positive sign for the first go around. The third area is really something that I take to be very encouraging, and I want the trustees to know that this is something that signals a positive outcome for this whole process, especially appearing in the first draft. And that is that in some cases, we've already seen that feedback from one person responding to the draft may help us identify or address a gap identified by another person reading the draft. So one person offers a suggestion that maybe not even deliberately or intentionally helps us fill a gap or address a problem elsewhere. And I'll give you a concrete example. One person who identified as a UMaine faculty member said, we need to be thinking about specific goals for environmental sustainability and climate change. And in a separate set of feedback, a USM staff member said, you should be looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a possible resource in that area. That's exactly what we want. We want the community to make the plan better by feeding into it and crowdsourcing the improvement of the plan, if that makes sense. And that bodes well for the next draft, and it bodes well for the final plan from my perspective. And then finally, just to be completely transparent, we received a very small number of responses that were uniformly negative. So just a very small number of people across the board, all components of the plan, did not have anything positive to say about the plan. It's difficult to work with feedback like that in a constructive way, but we will certainly be combing through that and honoring the fact that feedback was shared along with the rest of the feedback. But again, that was a very small minority of the comments, really about 2 out of the 27 that didn't find anything positive across the board in the plan. But at least I expected that. That's that's part of any publicly circulated draft on just about any important topic in a community as sizable as ours. So it didn't come as a surprise, but we will work with that feedback in the same way we work with the other feedback and turn it into the most productive material that we can. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the trustees might have about the feedback to date.
Jeff, I also thought it was interesting that going through it, that the unified accreditation came up in a lot of different ways, right? There were some places where people were using this, who don't like unified accreditation, who already don't like it, who never have liked it. And we're very open about like, I don't like it, and I'm going to tell you I don't like it. And here's another way I don't think I like it again. And then there were other people who were saying, okay, which is important. We got to know that, right? And then we also had people who were saying, okay, let's be less hyperbolic about what it is and more straightforward about what we're doing, right? But increasing flexibility and collaboration. And I thought that was another interesting thread that sort of ran throughout as I looked at words that were popping up more commonly.
Emily is.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Emily. Just in response to that, as you know, strongly held opinions die hard. So we still have people who are critical of the one university concept, which is no longer in play for us.
Right.
And you know, as a proud UMaine alum, there are still numerous people who refer to your alma mater as UMO, 40 years on from that name change. So 15, 20 years from now, there'll be people who will tell you, I don't like this unified accreditation, but we will work with that and make the very best of it.
Absolutely. Great. Barbara, go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, there were a couple comments that resonated with me, and while I certainly, along with others here, were deeply involved in all the meetings with the writing group and felt very comfortable with the version that was put out for comment, I'm beginning to think that some of the comments that made the point that we had way too many detailed action and goal items, 55, I think was the number that somebody came up with. And I'm beginning to think that comment needs to be taken into account. I think it's important to do measurement. I think we need goals and objectives, but I think the plan might have some higher level versions and leave the development of some of the more lower level or detailed aspects of that to the implementation phase that the system and the presidents and the board develop after the plan is adopted. There's a fine line there. I mean, we have to measure what we're doing, but I think we've exceeded our limit, I guess is my point. I was impressed with those comments.
Barbara, I'm really pleased to hear you say that subject is on the agenda for an update with the presidents later this morning and for the writing team tomorrow. We have a happy problem. If we need to tighten, to truncate, better do that than to be told that the plan is underdeveloped and that it lacks substance. So moving in a direction of parsimony and strengthening it that way is what we want. So I agree with you, and I think we can certainly achieve that.
I think there's also some grouping that can be done. I think that I think we were trying to account for everything in that first draft. And now that we're getting the feedback, I think it would be helpful to group some things as well. Other comments from committee members? Oh, Ray, do you want to share any thoughts from your meeting? Since you were talking about the strategic plan before this? Welcome to the meeting. Let me put you on the spot.
No, I was just having a quick discussion with peers, and telling them that I would get back to them after this discussion and everything, and Jackie will as well too, obviously. So, but they're just anxious to see the thoughts from this group about the strategic plan. I'll put it that way. So,
well, we were just discussing the thoughts of other people, our thoughts on the thoughts of others in this committee this morning. Other thoughts from committee members on what you read in the feedback doc and what you've been hearing maybe around campus or in your community with your peers? Professor Otto, I'm curious if you've been hearing much, because you've been very involved with us, and what the buzz is with faculty at this stage.
Some haven't completely read it yet because spring break is next week. Let's get to that point.
Yep.
One of the things that I'm hearing about from several small campuses is sort of a concern about how the opening courses or get that strategic initiative to get courses available at more campuses is ultimately going to work out, because you have this tension at a small campus. If we lose a faculty, we're going to tend to focus on teaching our courses. So here at Machias, next year, there's probably some cross-campus courses that aren't going to be taught because we don't have the faculty to teach it. And so you have this tension between serving your students and how do we make sure that those inter-campus courses can still get offered and not get undermined by just the loss of a faculty at one place. So it's one of these, I don't know that I have anything specific about it, but it's interesting how that tends to be bubbling up in a couple of different conversations I'm having.
That's really good feedback. Thank you. And it's really good to hear sort of how people are reading between the lines too, right? And what they're filling in for themselves. And I think that's something for us to be mindful of, particularly in light of the prior comment about, do we need fewer words in some cases, is that we have to be mindful that when we do use fewer words, there's more gaps for people to fill in with their own. So that's a really good piece of feedback. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ray, go ahead, President Rice.
Oh, I just wanted to add the DEI Council committee, system level DEI committee had some missives going back and forth, and I think you might get some feedback there that's been requested to take a look, particularly at number 4, that we kind of built into it explicitly to address diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'd expect to see some feedback there. There hasn't been a lot of feedback from members on that group, so I'm hopeful you might get some productive input there as well.
That's great. And Mike Scott, who's on this committee with us, he also co-chairs one of the DEI committees as well. And I know they're going to take a specific look at it. So hopefully we get a good, robust set of feedback on those initiatives. Other thoughts from this group on feedback? Jeremy, I don't need to put you on the spot, but I did it to Professor Otto too. So any feedback that you're hearing from your?
Yeah, so in the circles that I operate, there's been no feedback that I've received. I have had several folks ask me recently, hey, where's the committee going? What's underway? But really there's been no feedback that I've heard in the circles that I operate.
That raises a question that I have that I was going to ask later, but I'll ask it now. Jeff, I guess is to you, which is, when are we going to resend it to remind people that we want them to give us feedback? Because I think we should do that again before spring break, maybe today or tomorrow. So for people, and then again right after. I think we can't just ask them once. Particularly, I have in my mind the conversation we had with students at the ASA committee meeting last week about how emails, one email isn't enough sometimes, and I wonder how many other times we can send it out to make sure we're very clear we want feedback, because we do have till the 21st, so it's in our advantage to send it out again before spring break and then again after.
So we hadn't planned to do that, Emily. The queuing up that message is it's a process to get that done. We have the chancellor out of state right now, but let me explore that and see if we can get a reminder.
I would literally suggest just a bumping this kind of like UMaine community bumping this message from beginning of last week. Hope you'll take time to read and submit feedback. All the information is below. I don't think it needs to be anything more complicated than that. I love to send a good bumping this to the top of your inbox email. And I think people would appreciate that. So that would be my suggestion for today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other comments about the other feedback on the feedback?
So I will say, Emily, I met with Farmington's Faculty Senate on Monday, and there wasn't any specific really positive or negative feedback, nothing that stood out to them as being alarming. I met with Orono's Faculty Senate yesterday, but actually shared a different set of updates with them, so we didn't really talk about strategic plan. But coming up, I'll meet with the Faculty Governance Council right after spring break, then Machias's faculty, then the Presque Isle faculty in early April. So a number of meetings coming up directly with faculty and an opportunity to solicit their feedback in person and really get a sense of where people are.
That's great. And the writing group is set to meet this Friday as well.
Yes.
Great. Barbara.
I am growing concerned about the lack of potential mechanisms for students and alumni to provide feedback on this plan. I mean, those are our customers. And while it's natural that the people paid to work in this environment have specific concerns and comments, I am concerned that the great number of people that we're supposed to be designing this for, which is our students, and reflecting the views of those who've actually graduated or participated in this university system statewide, I'm concerned about that. And I wonder if Jeff or the others have given some thought to how to advertise and solicit comments from that audience.
So Barbara, I thought that I had said this at a writing team meeting previously, but it's entirely possible that I didn't, so I apologize. We do plan to send the next draft to students system-wide. We wanted to get feedback on the first draft, but we have a different message for students that really clarifies what this is, how they can contribute. And when we send it out, the second draft out, we'll probably, for that reason, send that same second draft, but different messages, one for employees and one for students, and solicit feedback from both in the same fashion and look to get the best response from our students as we can.
And just one follow-up question. Are all the boards of visitors getting this document?
Not to my knowledge. It's gone to employees.
Okay, I would definitely urge that, please.
And that message might come from Trish. Actually, Trish, maybe that could come from you to the boards of visitors, to the chairs of the boards of visitors anyway, to send to them as well. That's a great idea. That's a great idea, Barbara. Kelly.
Yeah, Barbara, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think maybe to our alumni associations and our foundations for the campuses that do have that, because those are people that are usually alumni and usually very invested. So I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yep.
Offer it. I don't know. It would be wise for them probably to have a meeting about that. But how they handle it, I don't know. But at least it was offered.
As long as it doesn't slow our timeline down, I'm for it. I'm for it always. Jeff, what is the timeline? Can you remind me, what is the date we are aiming for the second draft?
Monday, April 3rd. And that's at the chancellor's good recommendation. He wants there to be as much time as possible for everyone who receives the second draft to have a chance to review it meaningfully and share feedback as we're developing the final version. But then B, plenty of time for the president's chancellor and the board to look at the proposed final version as we move toward May 1st and really be comfortable that we've settled on the right language all the way around. And then May 1st is important for moving it into production, so it's ready to go for the board meeting at the end of the month in Fort Kent.
Yeah, that's great. I think we should definitely make sure we queue up a message again, maybe from Trish to those alumni affiliated groups and the board's visitors. Trish, go ahead.
Can we just review timing first? I think that's a great idea. We can definitely do that. But are you thinking wait for the second draft or do it now?
I'm thinking second draft.
Yeah. Okay. Can we just walk through? I'm trying to think through the process, Jeff. Calendar, May 1st. Is there a meeting of this committee? I'm sort of because I want to make sure we don't try to do editing at the board meeting.
Oh no.
No. So
board that's inclined to want to do that.
Yes.
So Trish, so we're shooting for Monday, April 3rd, basically the first weekday in Monday, so that we can encourage people in a relatively on a relatively aggressive timeline. Please send us your feedback on this second draft, because much like with the first draft, we will need to put the proposed final version in front of chancellor, presidents, and board in advance of May 1st and build in enough time to make final edits and then move it into. So the whole thing backs up from May 1st, which in turn backs up from the May 26, 27, whatever that date is, Fort Kent board meeting. So no, what we want is the board to have had ample time in advance of May 1st to say with the chancellor, this is what we want. And then we move forward to UMaine Marketing Communications, confident that the editorial phase is over and we're moving to production at that point.
Following the board meeting.
In advance of the May board meeting, so that if by May 1 the board, chancellor, presidents are happy with the plan, it can be presented publicly at the May board meeting in final form.
But the May board meeting, we've scheduled approval of the plan. So I'm a little concerned about timing and how we do this to make sure we don't get ahead of our board.
Well, that's why we would propose to share with you the plan near the end of April, so the board can say, yes, move forward in moving this into production.
But we need a way to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also did not expect there to be like a printed final version for the May meeting.
No,
I think that would come right after that.
If you don't want that, it gives us more time, which it improves life for the writing team in all kinds of ways. But if you do want the final version of the plan to be something you can hand out at the May board meeting, that would be.
No, I think we
want to finalize the plan at the board meeting. I don't think we want to. I don't want anyone to feel like we've done something, had it printed in glossy paper, and haven't asked them to approve it first, right? That's not a great. So I think we should adjust that. Let's take a look at the timeline, Jeff, and adjust it, which will give us a little more time for that feedback from students and others in April.
It's not inconceivable that we might have to have an emergency executive committee meeting and engage the board in April on a different topic. If that happens, we might possibly be able to expedite it, but I just want to make sure the board has a full and robust review of this as a whole. And it's not a rubber stamp approving a done deal.
So I serve at the pleasure of your timeline here, Trish. So whatever you decide is fine with me and the writing team. We can adjust accordingly. I'm just laying out for you what the timeline would be if you wanted the prior.
It may be that we just need to shift the sort of publication marketing timeline, right? Because it's just a matter of, we may just need to shift that, because what we don't want to have happen is that we've gotten something done and it's printed, and then at the board meeting we make some sort of something evolves, which may not happen, but just to make sure we don't have that happen, let's look at the timeline from the publication side of it, because we can always put something out electronically that's close to final before we go to print.
Yeah, and we don't have to. Emily, you and I and Jeff can talk about this a little bit and think about the timeline, because on the one hand, we want to be clear that this is the chancellor's work presented to the board, and the board approves or doesn't. On the other, I want to make sure that that's a robust review so that it's real. So let's just talk some more offline about how we do that. But I think Jeff, for purposes now, we should plan on the May meeting is where the board actually approves it, and then the marketing starts.
Understood.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay.
And I don't think it's a major departure.
No.
That's great. Any other Kelly, you have your hand up still. Do you have another comment? I want to just make sure I don't miss you. Okay. Any other feedback on the feedback before we start talking about the implementation model? Great, thank you, Jeff. And we look forward to the next batch of feedback coming on Monday, so we can continue to see all of the themes that are emerging. Let's now go to the next part of our agenda. So at the writing committee meeting a few weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, Barbara, Kelly, and I participated, in others in in seeing the presentation, is it the same presentation, Kim?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So a presentation about, the proposed implementation plan process and the model that is being used. It is a model that is used broadly. We didn't invent it. It's not something that it's something we are looking to borrow and adapt for our process. So am I turning it over to, who am I turning it over to now? Is it?
I think that would be me, Emily,
Right,
unless Jeff or Carolyn have anything to share. Yeah.
No, and I will say we wanted to bring this presentation here because implementation, there was in the draft, there was sort of an image of an implementation slide, and there were members of this group and the board that were kind of like, what is that? That's confusing. And we want to make sure we put it in context and get feedback from this group specifically on how we should visually represent implementation in this document so it is useful. And so why don't I turn it over to you? Go ahead.
That's great, Trustee Kane. Thank you. And absolutely, both the release of the strategic plan draft and then also the release of my slides for this meeting, I think created some interest and out of context confusion that makes sense. And I've been looking forward to this chance to bring this with more information to all of you and have a conversation about this model and why I like it and why I think it will be helpful for our system. Actually, I'm going to pop up some slides actually before I start talking. Okay, I'm hopeful that you can all see that. So the implementation model is called the Balanced Scorecard Framework, and it's useful for three reasons. It's simple in design. The essential elements can be seen on one page. And secondly, we can share as much or as little as we need to, depending on the audience. And I'll talk through that a little bit more as well. And everyone, everywhere in our system will be able to see and show how their work ties to strategy. It helps all of us to know how and where to invest our resources. And sometimes that's money and sometimes that's time. So we know, all of us on the screen and around our system, we know that what we don't want is shelfware. We've heard it multiple times that, and the reality is that only 10% of organizations do successfully execute their strategy, and only 5% of employees understand what the strategy is. Those are national numbers, not UMS numbers, but we're probably, it's possible that we're close to that. What we do want, and what we've heard consistently from trustees and the chancellor and constituents, is that we need a model that will meet at least three requirements. One is that our strategic plan, which is of course our first major plan since 2004 and the first since unified accreditation, that it not sit on a shelf. We want it to be clear and actionable. And we want it to be easily communicated and know what progress towards our goals looks like, that the progress is captured. And we do have multiple layers, of course, throughout our organization. The nice thing about this plan is that individuals at all levels will be able to understand how their work contributes to the overall vision. This is all consistent with good practice. Implementing strategic plans should be simple if we communicate constantly, if we reallocate resources to support high value and in-demand projects, and if we hold employees, including managers, accountable using effective measures. So the Balanced Scorecard is a framework. It will help us manage strategy, measure progress, and communicate. It communicates what the organization needs to accomplish. It aligns the day-to-day work that everyone is doing with strategy. It allows us to stay focused and prioritize projects and products and services. It will help us to make data-informed decisions by measuring and monitoring progress towards specific targets. And it also provides line of sight and visible connections between projects and programs and our strategic objectives and mission and the strategy of the organization. And as part of that, it translates our strategic objectives into a set of performance indicators. These are some of the universities that use the Balanced Scorecard. I'm the most familiar with University of California at San Diego. They've been using it the longest, and I have a close colleague who leads the department their strategic initiatives office at UCSD. And then this slide highlights some of the articles about the Balanced Scorecard. Two of the takeaways include the importance of connecting our goals to strategy, which makes sense, and also how doing that improves decision making. So I will break down specific elements of the scorecard, but before I do, I want to share that achieving balance is at the core of why the scorecard works. Balance must be attained among factors in 3 areas of performance measurement: external and internal constituents, financial and non-financial indicators, and lag and lead indicators. And we're probably more familiar with the other measures, but the lagging and leading indicators are past performance indicators like revenue and customer satisfaction, where we measure them because they've already happened and we know what those numbers are. Leading indicators are the performance drivers that lead to the achievement of the lagging indicators. And the framework really helps us to become strong in all of these areas. So there are 6 elements to the balanced scorecard. I'm going to be getting into some details here on an early morning, and hopefully, we can talk about these as you have questions. But the 4 of the 6 elements, the first one is that there are 4 perspectives or views, and there are different names for these views. We can name them whatever we want. It needs to be meaningful to our system. But essentially, the first one is really the financial perspective and the stewards or stakeholders. What is our financial performance? Are we using resources effectively? How do we look to trustees, the legislature, the citizens of Maine? If we were a company, we would be concerned with how we look to shareholders. The customer perspective includes the customer identified value and satisfaction. So how do our students see us? Internal processes refer to the processes that we need to excel at. Here we strive for efficiency and quality and improvement. And then the final area is the learning and growth of all employees. What is the work culture like? Are staff engaged? And do we have the necessary infrastructure and technology to support them? And having a balanced area will help us to sustain our ability to change and improve and innovate. Having satisfied and engaged staff, employees, faculty is important for all of us. The second element are the actions that we will implement to see the improvement in our strategies. They make the abstract concepts like mission and vision, even our core competencies, it makes those concepts actionable. The third element is the strategy map, which is a simple graphic, and simple does not mean simplistic. It shows cause and effect connections between strategic objectives and how they align to the mission. So it allows us to visualize and communicate. So as one example, if you look at that bottom row where it says learning and growth, you might imagine that you could show how engaged staff can then improve internal processes, which leads to better services for students. And then that all leads to retention. So you can see the connection between the objectives. Very important. The fourth element is the goals, what we measure. In this case, our KPIs and our target goals. And the fifth one is our projects, new and existing projects, short-term or long-term. They all need to be measured and managed just like any other project. And so those are included in the scorecard as well. And then the sixth and final element is the one that created so much interest and questions in the plan. And of course, this is all just sample. Everything I've provided here is just an example. But it's one of the most powerful concepts of the balanced scorecard framework. It makes strategy real for every one of us, all of us in the system. It creates a line of sight between the work that I do as an individual, or the folks on Jeremy's team and facilities, and how our work contributes to the overall mission of the organization. So as you move through the organization, you include the university, the college or department, and the individual goals. But of course, not everybody sees all 5,000 maps. The trustees will see one level of information that they need. Individuals working with supervisors will see a very different level. So that's why this is so effective. Just to show you that this can be seen on one side, it's a sample, and it's also a rather unattractive one. This was my attempt using squares and circles. Again, we can make this look like whatever we need it to look like, and we can call these things whatever we need to. But I just wanted to share that Simple is good and clear, and having things on one page is very helpful. The great thing about this too, and I talked a little bit already about staff engagement and employee faculty engagement. But when we're in balance, the strategy happens with our staff and faculty and not to them. And everyone can tell the story of what we do and how our work supports the mission. The employees, the organization is then aligned. These next few slides, I won't linger on these examples. I just want to show that there's not just one way to build this. These are samples from different organizations, different universities. The point is to make it simple and clear and to make it meaningful for our organization. These next couple of slides highlight cautions and challenges. And we actually, I think, heard one of them earlier from Trustee Alexander when she was talking about the metrics. Number two is that if you have too many metrics, it can divert your attention and make it hard to focus and accomplish goals. We'll obviously be paying attention to these cautions and challenges as we move through our implementation. There was a case study done by several universities, and they also had lots of positive things to say. These were some of the challenges of them, and we'll certainly pay attention. This is the slide that I really want to, this is really the last slide of focus here that I want to draw your attention to, because this talks about what's next. And it shows really on the left, moving from strategy all the way to action. And the good news is that we've accomplished almost everything in the first box. The stakeholder engagement is in pink because that's ongoing. And in fact, a key element to the success of this plan is really making sure that or any change is making sure that we identify and engage champions at all levels. And that would be an important piece of this, really implementing our plan. In the last box, you'll see the key features that also will keep this plan alive and off the shelf. It talks about, we'll be meeting regularly to review metrics. It will be managed year to year to make sure it's always fresh and appropriate. There's a cycle, there will be a built-in cycle for doing that. So the last thing I'll say before welcoming your questions is I do believe that the balanced scorecard would balance and strengthen our system in a holistic manner and make our strategy operational, which I think is something that we can all get behind, right? I believe that to be the case. I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions you may have or comments that you may have.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there are comments and questions. Anyone want to, oh yeah, Kelly, go right ahead.
I just want to say I really like this. It's simple. I think a lot of times we get lost in the detail, and it's very important to inspect what we expect. And sometimes we forget what we expect, so it's hard to inspect it. You can just really get confused and stuff. And I think simple is better, and it keeps us all accountable. So I really like the balanced scorecard. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Thanks, Kelly. Other comments, impressions? Yeah, Barbara, go ahead.
I was looking at the development of these metrics as the way for the board to measure progress in achieving our vision and to hold the systems office and through the office, the presidents accountable for meeting our goals and objectives. I think we probably get into a significant issue in suggesting that this is somehow a measurement of a faculty member's performance. I would leave the presidents and the current system of evaluating performance and leave out the notion that we are measuring individual employees with these KPIs. That this is a way for the board to measure our system's progress. It's up to the systems office and the presidents to implement their part of this plan and work with the tools that they have available to them And we will be looking at the system office and the presidents for how that has happened. And that may require in the future different resources or whatever. But I'm a little nervous about some of the implications of these slides with regard to individual employees. Is that a fair concern on my part?
Trustee Alexander, I think that's a very important distinction, and I agree with you. And I think what you're pointing out to me, or what I'm taking away from your comment, is that the slide and the comments around it are probably not clear enough. So thank you. I absolutely agree. So my conversations with my supervisor, her conversations with the chancellor, others, and all the way as individuals are working all the way through their presidents, absolutely, that is an institution, a university specific, college specific, department specific set of opportunities. And I agree with you. I think the thing that I like about the line of sight is that for me as an individual working with my supervisor, I can frame my goals and objectives within the overarching objectives. It does not mean that I'm responsible for everything that the board is asking for us, but I will understand if that's something that my supervisor chooses to do with me, or a university president chooses to make as an expectation, then I would then understand how my work rolls up to the larger mission. The nice thing about this scorecard is that because our institution is complex with a set of universities, and within that, individual universities and a law school with their own strategic plans, with their own sets of, with their own visions and sets of values and so forth, it would roll up as appropriate based on those individual plans. So I absolutely agree with you, and I'm taking away the importance of making sure that it's clear, that's clear. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Trish, go ahead.
Thank you. Kim knows that this is hard for me. I have a hard time getting my head around it. It looks to me terribly complicated, and I appreciate that it's not going to be. And I was just reminded of in my former life, we did process mapping to figure out why eligibility for ACA programs was taking forever. And it was the most cumbersome looking thing, and it was absolutely fabulous. It actually saw the problem and solved it. So I have every confidence that this will work, even though it baffles me. But I'm particularly intrigued by the one-pager that will be the board's working document. And I think that will be really, I was glad to see it, and I look forward to it. One question I have as we think about implementation is, how do we, this is a system plan, and each of the universities has their own plan. How do we measure, how do we integrate that? How do we make sure that we support the unique roles of each university plan? And how do we measure how it all falls together? Because it seems to me the whole is the sum of a part, and we want to see how that plays. And I wonder if there's a way to do that in this model.
So absolutely. So I'll speak a little bit about the model's role in doing that, and then recognize that maybe Jeff or either President Edmondson or President Rice may have a comment about their own university in this. So what the model can do is to identify, certainly starting with the UMS core commitments at the top, presidents would then be able to identify, and their teams would be able to identify which of the, within their own strategic plans, which elements are helpful. Some of our universities won't have as large a role with regard to research, say. And there are going to be other examples where there's a much more alignment among the core commitments. So the scorecard allows for that flexibility depending on as the cascading happens, it allows for that flexibility. But I want to see if Jeff or either of the presidents have comments about that as well, how they would see that happening.
Sure. I mean, I can jump in. We're in the third year of the USM strategic plan. So the timing of this is really wonderful for us because we'll have the university system plan as we begin our fourth year of a 5-year strategic plan. we can socialize the plan well, and then begin our own university strategic planning with the system plan at the center. And then my goal would be to latch maybe isn't the right word, but to make sure that our strategic plan is explicitly connected to the system plan. So by the time our new plan needs to be in place, it will be aligned with the system plan.
Okay, Trustee Alexander?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to pause for a second. Did anyone else have comments on the prior piece? I know, Kimmery, you had asked if Jeff or the presidents, before I go back to Barbara, had comments.
Oh,
on
I
that.
would just, yeah, I would just add, we are in the exact same position USM is, because of course our plan was the first one that wasn't adopted as this cycle, as the board realized this cycle needed to happen. Ours wasn't adopted as a strategic plan, but was allowed to be an operational plan, and we're at the exact same stage of that cycle. But I would say the other thing of this strategic plan, to Trustee Alexander's point, and questions, is that this allows the institution to identify its priorities and the constituents demographics it serves within the larger structure of the university main system and where its priorities are. So, and then how it is successful in achieving those priorities, and then to measure the level of that success in regards to the totality of the students that the system is serving, and what needs to be addressed, what needs to be improved, right? Where it's being successful, where it's not being successful, where it has to make changes in regards to its, even its operational structure or its educational structure. So I think this is very helpful for that, as it situates us in a landscape that will reduce, I think, the competitiveness that has happened amongst the institutions, as we all, just try to identify these kind of strategic plannings for ourselves, if that makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, President Rice. Jeff, did you have something to add, or can I go back to Barbara?
No, please go to Barbara. Thank you.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
I was going to say my recollection of the draft of the strategic plan is that it has, or had at the drafting stage, I'm asking if it made it, a requirement that each of the universities revise and update their own strategic plans by a date certain to reflect a fully adopted system-wide strategic plan. Is that still in there? I think it is.
I'll check, Barbara. It should be if it's not.
And
Yeah.
I would just say that would be wise for presidents to implicitly assume that.
Alignment is good, right? we're not looking to replace or change them. It's just about aligning and getting them all headed in the
they
same
may
direction.
need to be changed.
Sure, but I think but part of our strategic plan is that we want each campus to have its own identity here. So we want to make sure we want to make sure the language doesn't seem like we're trying to supersede or sort of take that away. We do want to make sure there's a deliberate alignment, and where there are things that are in conflict, certainly that would have to be resolved. But I think we're not trying to say scrap yours, take ours. We're trying to say let's look at them and align them in the same direction, which I think is really important.
I think my concern was more about how we monitor it, how we watch, how we support that. But as we look at the implementation of our plan, we recognize that it's implemented largely by universities. So just how we watch that is sort of my concern.
And I think, Kimmery, that's something that as we think about this model, I want to make sure we're just specifically asking the question, is there other feedback for us today on this balanced scorecard model, right? Because this is one of those things that's going to be hard to unwind once we get going with it, because it's important that we structure it this way from the beginning so that we can use it consistently, apply it evenly, making sure all of the elements show up in the draft that goes forward. So that's why we really wanted to dedicate time to this today to get the feedback. As Professor Otto, go ahead.
I do like it now that I have been walked through it a little bit more. I think that is going to be the important part, that in this process, there's good communication on how this is going to be used. Because it's not necessarily intuitive, but I think once you have heard it explained, I can see how it would be very useful and simple and easy to convey. But we're definitely going to have to think about talking to the faculty, how this is, what it's being used for, and how we're using it.
So socialization of this implementation structure is equal to socialization of the plan itself, I think. That's how we make sure it's not a shelf.
I would actually say it actually may be more important, because the faculty often, it's how are things go, it's really the devil's in the detail, and how things are implemented sometimes is more important than what's on that document. And so that's where I think this one may be more important, because it's not as intuitive as if me reading a strategic plan. Yeah, I may be reading between the lines. I may be reading stuff in there. I may see the metric, but that's going to be key. So, and I will have to say, I have to go teach chemistry lab now. So we will see you.
Thank goodness you're doing that. Thank you for doing that. Have a great day. Good feedback.
Emily,
Yeah, go ahead.
Emily, on that point from William, and I'll speak slowly to so I can gauge whether Carolyn nods along with me or starts frowning. But I think almost certainly this will involve a roadshow with Kim, who's an expert at this, and probably Carolyn and me and others going campus to campus, faculty to faculty, early days to walk through this implementation scorecard, explain what it is and what it isn't, and answer any and all questions system-wide. So faculty have a clear grounding in it, a comfort level with it. So presidents know their faculties, understand what is and what isn't, and that that lays the ground for success from my perspective.
So Jeff, I'll do one better than a nod. When I actually wrote on my paper when William was talking, Kim equals roadshow. So we're on the same page.
Well, and I think it will be very important to know the right timing for that roadshow too, right? Not summer, when we think about going back to campus in the fall and socializing this at the end of August into September and October will be really important, that we meet people where they're at when they're literally around and available. So that would be good. That would be great. And also, I think sort of now I'm looking at Chair Riley and speaking slowly, because I think if we can land the approval of the board in May, we can also do some additional roadshow work at our summer meeting to with the board, right? Additional socialization of the implementation and sort of where we go from here. Again, pending approval of the chair. I think we have a lot to cover in our May meeting. So I think the goal is to make sure we get this approved and people feel good about it and be proud of it, but no, it's not the last time we're going to talk about it. It's now going to be part of our regular vernacular for sure. Other comments about, I know we've lost a few people, but yeah, go ahead, Kelly. Thank you.
Timing of the roadshow, did you say summer?
No, I said fall. I said
Oh,
not.
okay. All right. I was stuck on the summer thing. So
Not
you know what? I'm delusional.
our
There's too
meeting
much
is in the
snow.
summer. We can do something in the summer for the board, but for the
Okay.
campus communities, it would have to be the fall.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Jeremy.
Clarification.
Lots of good discussion I've been listening to from everybody, and in my mind, probably to make it concise would be my recommendation. The single page concept that Barbara talked about, keeping the wording concise and understandable. I think making it as readable and as concise as possible is the key to success. That's my recommendation.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Jeremy. I keep thinking about, if we can get there, if there is a one pager, right? I keep thinking someone's going to just put it in the paper. When people, as they're reading their coffee, like I do every morning, and I read the Bangor Daily News, could look at it and see it, right? And see it come to life. So we want to make sure it's simple, understandable, and can have real meaning. For
Yeah,
people
the challenge is balancing the detail that's in there with being concise, and that's the trick.
That's exactly right.
Emily, I'm waiting for you to reduce it to the elevator speech.
No, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at the soundbite, Trish. So I'll work on the soundbite version, but it will be very substantive. I can tell you that. Kim Marie, anything else from you today? Just for the record, I'm not opposed to ending a meeting early. Like I'm not opposed to that. So like we don't have to sit and look at each other for 27 more minutes. But I want to make sure everyone, because this is an important meeting for us. This is really about how we're hearing feedback and making sure we're raising any additional concerns or suggestions related to the implementation. Because as I said, once we start putting it in this form, we don't want to have to wind it back. We really won't be able to do that and stay on track. So Kim Marie, did you have anything else to add?
Just a thank you for all of the comments, and particularly attention to the timing and how this is shared. We do need we will need champions throughout our system to make sure that that understand this and make sure it's clear and communicated. There are two folks that we tend to like to hear about change from, and one is the topmost leader at an organization, and the next is is your direct supervisor. And so making sure that managers at all levels understand this and that it's useful to them is going to be key. And also, I think the timing of our roadshow is important, because by then we'll have obviously the final plan, and we'll have some more clear visual examples of how this would work, and what's in it for individuals and what's in it for managers. So I appreciate that. And thank you for the time. Great.
Any other pieces of feedback for Kim Marie or for Jeff today? Feedback on the structure feedback. A lot of feedback loops going here.
Since we have time, can I tell you about my favorite all-time New Yorker cartoon?
Yes, please.
There's a cowboy beside his horse patting him and saying, "You're a great horse. I can rely on you. You're terrific." And the horse turns and says, "I said feed bag."
That is a good one. That is a good one, Trish. That is a very funny note to potentially. Any other comments? I want to make sure no one gets.
Emily, just to let Trish know, President Rice will share that joke with 86 people in the next week and a half. I'm confident.
I'm already making a TikTok.
I'm gonna use that like 17 times today alone. I have many feedback related meetings today. This is gonna be the theme of the day. I said feedback. It's very funny. Okay, thank you all. This continues to be a lot of work, and it's really in the flow now, right? The writing committee meets again on Friday, and this is now when all of our thoughtful planning starts to come to life on the page in a new way, where we have to be extra mindful of words. I was thinking about how when we last met, we talked about how was there anything in our plan that we were worried might sort of backfire on us if it went public, and I don't think we've seen that, right? I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, I expected it to be longer. I expected it to be shorter." You know, you kind of get those kinds of pieces of feedback, but I personally, at least, didn't get any sort of what the heck kind of calls, and I'm proud of that. You know, I think we measure progress in many strange ways sometimes, and the fact that many people have already read it and responded, I'm sure there'll be more this week. Jeff, I really feel strongly we need to get it back out and bump it again this week, and then again right after spring break, so we can make sure we're doing our due diligence to get the feedback, and then we'll be good to go. So thank you all very much. Yeah,
thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. I know we do not need to take any kind of adjournment vote or anything, but I'll just say thank you all. Barbara, enjoy California. Bring back the weather with you, please, as it is now snowing here at my house. And everyone have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. See you later.